Okay, now I'm just going to kind of focus on strategies that are going to help decrease cognitive load and avoid overload of our students in their working memory. So number one that I want to recommend is social learning. And here it's because the elements that the students are thinking about are actually shared by their group. And you're going to do some reading in a moment about collaborative learning and cognitive load around that, and how actually working in a collaborative space provides students with worked examples, and they create like a social scaffold for their learning, which I think is amazing. And so I really want to encourage you to give that a go, to use social learning or collaborative learning in your evidence task as you're doing planning and programming in for your unit or for your sequence of learning lessons, to really think about how you can use that in your program or in your sequence of lessons. The next strategy is for larger prior knowledge. One of the things that we really do a disservice to our students on in Australia is that our students just kind of progress as they get older, not based upon their knowledge. And so even though they've done year 7 or year 8 and they're in your year 9 class, or maybe they've done year 1 and year 2 and you've got them for year 5, you can't presume that they've actually learned that knowledge from those stages. You need to check, you need to find out what they know and then build on that. And if they don't have all the prior knowledge, then you need to make sure they do have it, because that will decrease the cognitive load for dealing with what you've got to give them in your class, whether that be year 9 or year 5, right? This will help to ensure students have the base to do the higher order thinking, the critical and creative thinking, and the problem solving. And it will help them to make connections to things that they already know, because if they haven't got the prior knowledge, what are they going to connect it to? Ideas really need to be known before you can start doing deeper thinking too. You can't ask kids to go straight into creativity or straight into critical thinking if they don't actually have the base knowledge to start with. So get them their base knowledge and then they can build upon that. You also need to try and reduce the amount of unneeded information. In any video or in any time you're giving a lecture, all that unneeded information that comes in is going to increase the cognitive load, and you need to decrease that. And so actually for me, I think flipped learning decreases the cognitive load for learning, because there aren't other students there distracting them and causing issues for them. I'm not having to tell this student over here to be quiet while this one's trying to take notes, and that one down the back has already forgotten what I started with at the beginning, and so I've got to go back to the PowerPoint that's 3 slides ago. That kind of stuff increases the cognitive load for my students. They're getting distracted, they're not thinking, they're not focused, which, right at the beginning of this course, being focused is one of the things that the students must be in order to learn. If you give some pre-instructions and outlines, this will also help to decrease the cognitive load. So if you kind of talk about where we're going, what we're going to do today, and have any kind of scaffold around what we're going to be going through, getting through. This could also include like some key vocab, maybe some big ideas. You might do a worked example and then some partial examples. That helps to really decrease the cognitive load on our students as they're learning that, because they can see the big example. Okay, that doesn't take a lot of load. Now I'm doing half an example, I'm only increasing the load a little bit. I've got that. And then the next bit, and you're just slowly building and developing upon that. And then in any kind of presentation, if you use words and images together, that will help to decrease it. And it's not just one medium. So don't just have a video going, and don't just have an image there and go, okay, think about that. What you want to do is have an image with words, or have a video with some kind of explanation to go with it. That is really going to help your students. Now, one thing where you don't want multimodal things happening is when you come to reading. It is much more beneficial for your students to read either to themselves out loud, but not have someone read to them while they read, because it's distracting. It's actually forcing them to be a bit more multitasking when they should just be focused. So try and keep them focused. And I know for me, whenever I read something and someone else is reading, I find it really frustrating. I'd much prefer to read it at my own pace, and kids are generally the same too. When it comes to literacy type stuff, if you want your students to develop an understanding of the content they're reading, have them read it by themselves or read it aloud. Don't mix the two together. A few more strategies for you. Providing work examples are really good for novices. You then need to do partially completed and then attempt the whole thing for themselves. So as you're moving through, so the novice gets the partially worked example, gets the worked examples. As they get better, they get partially worked. And then when they're good at it, they can do it by themselves. And so if you already have kids that are good at it, don't give them the worked examples, just give them the questions that they need to do, or the task they have to go off and try, and let them do it themselves. You should be succinct with your words. You should also cue critical information for the students, and the more cues you give them, the better. So, for example, throughout all of my videos that I make, I have words that appear up on the screen or images, and they are visual cues for some critical information that might be going on throughout the videos. And so that's something that you need to think about too when you're talking about things that are really important to people. Just go, all right, this is really important. It'll come up down here, or it's going to come up here. Or when you're talking to the students, just go, guys, highlight this. Make sure you write this down. It just cues that for them so they know this is what I need to focus on. This is really important. Slow down and focus. And it's really a good trick to teach your students is that when things get hard, they just need to slow down to make sure that they're focused. Another thing that students really will benefit from is if you allow them to control the pace of their learning. So again, for me, I'll promote flip learning there. Students control the videos, they control where they're at. Once they finish the video, they control what then comes afterwards too a lot of the time, whereas that's not always going to be the case. So you want to try as much as you can to allow your students to control the pace of their learning within your classroom. When you're teaching, try and make sure you use personal pronouns, so talk to them as you. You will do really good if you do this. I really love when you do this because I can see that you are thinking this way. Those types of things help make it more personal and make sure that the students know you're talking to them. You need to teach students to really stop, look, listen and focus when things get hard. So whenever they get to something and go, oh, I'm struggling to get this, all right, just stop, let's take a moment, look at it, let's read through it, focus on it. Okay, now what are we going to do step by step? Because when things get hard, if you slow down, you actually often can handle it. Now, another thing that we don't do a lot with our students is talk about metacognition and teach them about how they learn. So if students know how they learn, they are more able and capable learners. So if you talk to students after this course about how their brain works and how they can handle this amount and how they can reduce their cognitive load themselves by minimizing distractions, for example, or by making sure they slow down and focus, that's just teaching them metacognition stuff to help them to learn. If they know that, they become more capable at learning. We should have a growth mindset too for our students, because everything is very clear that when it comes to our students learning, that prior knowledge is what's important. So if you just build on that, they can build and build, and then their learning will go up exponentially for that content area, because the more prior knowledge you have, the easier it is to learn. And so if you think about that for your students, go, this is hard to begin with. Think back to when you first learned how to read. That was so difficult. I know my son is doing it at the moment, and he finds it really hard. But I know that it's going to get to a point where suddenly he can read. And now look at all the things that have opened up to me in terms of what I'm learning, and my reading gets better and better and better the more I use it, and the more I ask questions about it, and the more I critique it. So making sure that, thinking about students with a growth mindset, they might be here, but they can get there no matter who they are. You just got to help them with the steps along the way. Some will take a lot longer than others, but they still can get there. Now, the more a student learns in a working domain or subject area, the greater their working memory will become. So like I was saying just before, as they learn stuff, it increases exponentially. If you're an expert in an area, you can handle 8 items compared to 4 in your working memory. So think about this with your students. As they become better and better in the subject area or whatever it is that you are teaching them, it's really important to think about, okay, they're going to get better and better at this. I need to increase their level of thinking, have them going deeper, relating ideas, critiquing ideas, solving problems, maybe starting to be more creative and giving them more freedom with what they're doing. Mnemonics are very helpful. So if you can start to give your students acronyms, phrases, start rhyming stuff for them, give them acrostics, peg words, and I'm going to give you a reading on peg words coming up, because peg words I think is a really great way of just memorizing stuff nice and quickly, and story chaining, where you have really elaborate stories with really crazy things in them that just jog your memory about what's coming up next. They're the kinds of things that if we teach our students to do this, they can become really good learners.